This is how taking a break from your literal mind can lead to self-awareness, clarity, courage, and much, much healthier relationships with other people. My name's Hazel Gale. I'm a former therapist turned author and creator of the Betwixt app. And a few years ago, I was in Nicaragua learning to surf. In one early morning lesson when I was really tired, my instructor noticed that I was flagging and suggested that I rest and watch him surf for a bit. He took my board and left me in the small break to observe his brilliance out in the main break. So I stood with my back to the shore and my feet on the sand, happily diving through the soft white foam and watching as my instructor showed off. What I didn't realise was that all of that diving, combined with an undertow that I hadn't known was there, was taking me gradually out into the deeper, scarier water. Seemingly without any warning, I found myself in the midst of the main break, and it was too deep for me to stand. I looked up just as an enormous wall of water towered above me and readied itself to crash down from about 6 feet above my head. The only thing I knew to do was what my mother had taught me as a child. You have to swim into the waves to withstand their power. Over and over again, that water rose up in front of me and I hurled my body into it with all the energy I had. But these waves were bigger than the ones I was used to. And without being able to push off the seabed, I could only make it about halfway through before they'd pull me back up and then throw me down into the churning, terrifying water. Between each of these bombardments, there were just a few seconds when I could see the sky. And in those moments, I would frantically try to touch a toe to the ground, but it was always just out of reach. This went on for what seemed like an age. With every wave, I grew weaker and more hopeless. I gasped for air, I choked on salty water over and over again, and I distinctly remember the feeling of giving up. Exhausted, terrified, and heartbroken, I thought, this is it. This is the end. I can't make this stop. I've been in some frightening situations in my life, but I've never once come close to accepting the end, except that one time. Spoiler alert, I got out safely. And how that happened is something I'll never forget. I'll tell you about it in just a moment, but first, let's talk about water. For Carl Jung, water symbolized the unconscious mind and the emotions, representing the depths and mysteries of the human psyche, all that lies beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Symbolically, deep water represents the realm of the shadow self, or the lost and rejected and repressed parts of the personality, and it's where those parts can be glimpsed too. Not directly, because it doesn't work that way, but in the water's rippled reflection. In other words, we can meet our true selves, our whole selves, not by observing ourselves directly, but by snatching up the brief and fleeting shapes and outlines offered when we dare to approach the things that feel deep and dark and mysterious in life. Just like my experience in Nicaragua, this can be frightening and it's often disorienting, but it's also the route to truly empowering growth and change. And thankfully, it doesn't all have to feel like drowning. We can swim safely through the waters of the unconscious mind by engaging in processes, thought, and conversations that allow for creativity and imagination. Any kind of creative expression, be it visual art, music, writing, sculpting, movement and dance, comedy, or anything else, can help us to bring hidden aspects of the psyche into the light of consciousness. You can think of it a bit like fishing in the ocean, but without the killing part. Because this process, known as shadow work in Jungian psychology, involves not just confronting but also integrating, which means accepting, the less acknowledged parts of the self. The reason creativity can serve as such an effective channel for this work is because it allows the unconscious to express itself in a symbolic way, which is the only way it can, therefore giving us access to thoughts, feelings and perspectives that might not so easily emerge through rational contemplation alone. So why do this work? For Jung, integration of shadow aspects was really the entire aim of psychoanalysis. He believed that exploring the depths of the unconscious was essential for achieving individuation, the process of disentangling ourselves from our past in order to become who we truly are, therefore moving towards a state of authentic wholeness. In particular, we are likely to see changes in our relationships as a result of engaging in shadow work, both those we have with ourselves and with others. This is because unintegrated shadow content functions like a barrier between us and the rest of the world. Unless we learn who we really are and dare to show that to the world, then we'll always find it hard to experience true connection and trust. Because if we don't express our true selves, then our true selves are not actually in any of the relationships we have. Rather, it's a false, warped, edited, and incomplete version of who we are that's trying to connect with others. Deep down, we know this, which can make it extremely difficult to feel loved or liked. Instead, we find ourselves waiting for our relationships to go up in smoke and thinking things like, when they find out what I'm really like, they'll leave, or they just won't like the real me. But there's more. No matter how well we think we're hiding our unpalatable bits, those around us also know that we're not all there. We convince ourselves that we're great at obscuring our true thoughts and feelings, and it's true that we are really good at hiding these things from ourselves, but we're not so good at hiding them from other people. People can sense phoniness like dogs picking up on a scent. They might not know the details or even realize exactly why something seems off, but a part of them knows that they're not getting the full picture. And so regardless of whether they've consciously acknowledged the block, they will automatically keep their distance, either in a literal sense or just by not emotionally connecting or not daring to be vulnerable with us. As a result, we find ourselves in lonely relationships, always feeling like true connection, trust and stability are out of reach. Frantically, we try to touch a toe to the ground, but there's only ever emptiness where we hope to find something tangible. To make matters worse, the other thing that happens when shadow content stays in the shadow is projection. If we don't allow the parts of ourselves that we don't like or can't accept for any reason to be a part of our self-awareness, they don't just disappear from the world. Instead, we throw these traits and fears out and onto those around us. Other people start to function like dark pools of water that reflect our true faces back at us. And when we don't like and accept our true faces, we will not accept them either. Ever noticed how really critical people are often the ones who seem to suffer the most from self-doubt? That's what's going on there. Shadow work can change these things and much more. Of course, it can be achieved in therapy or via practices like mindfulness. But if those things don't float your boat, you can also do it by engaging your creativity and imagination. By doodling mindfully, writing songs, painting pictures, composing poems, journaling or recording your dreams. And the best bit is that it's not even while doing creative things that we can access important insights. Anything that evokes emotion can lead us to the shadow. A photograph or painting that stops us in our tracks. A song that brings a tear to the eye. If we get the feels, then we're in touch with the water. What matters is what we do next. Do we just shrug it off and carry on? Or do we pay attention? Here are some questions to ask yourself while you're doing or just observing something creative and or emotional. These are only starting points, and they won't cover everything, but I hope they'll help you to begin this process by awakening probably the most important thing of all when it comes to shadow work: curiosity. Screen grab these 6 pages, or at least the first, last, and whichever from the middle feel relevant to you, and save them on your phone so you can check in whenever you could benefit from these prompts. If you do engage with this work though, please bear in mind that you don't need to find big, important insights right away. In fact, it's probably best that you don't. Instead, keep a diary of your notes and let it grow over time. If something is important, it won't just come up once, it'll repeat. And trust me, you'll know when something clicks into place. We all know that sense of an idea just being right, even though we very often ignore it. So look out for that resonance, that ring of truth in an idea. And when you notice it, go with it. Let it flow and just pay attention to what happens after you acknowledge it. Because even if you've landed on difficult news, when you experience that sense of truth in it, you might just find that the water all of a sudden feels a little calmer. A surfer saved me that day in Nicaragua. He jumped from the wave he'd been riding, untied his board from his ankle, hauled me up onto it, and then pointed me in the direction of the beach as the next wave approached. I shook my head, panicking at the very thought, but he was firm. "You have to go with the water," he shouted, and pushed me forwards. The sheer force of the wave that came threw me meters up into the air, and again I crashed down into the churning white foam. But this time, the sand was there to meet me. And when I scrambled to my feet, the water now stopping somewhere around my chest, almost immediately, the waves seemed beautiful once again. I didn't speak to the surfer again after that moment. In fact, he seemed to just disappear. But I'll never forget him, nor the lesson he taught me. As always, I really hope you find this helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share so other people can find it too. And finally, if you'd like to take an epic journey through a magical world in the name of personal growth, then you can download Betwixt, the mental health game, which is available on the iOS App Store and Google Play.